Not sure what is happening. Welcome to PhD with Woman on It, Hack the Future. My name is Beata Young, and today's PhD Positivity Hack Delivered will be by our guest, Annabel Kaye. Topic: Closing the Freelance Compliance Gap. Episode 76 starts here. Let me remind you, this is a grassroots community that focuses on Women on It, an inclusive forum of women in technology, startups, and female leaders who are supported by men as well. And I bring heart to that hustle because empathy is my mojo. And empathy is critical when you are closing the freelance compliance gap. I would like to mention a couple of things before we start with a chat with our lovely guest. Congratulations to Naira Hashem for a successful PhD live stream last week. Naira has imparted her technological knowledge to our viewers and inspires others to think and do something for the community. As Naira stated, if you want to succeed, you should surround yourself with successful people. We were indeed surrounded by successful people during the live stream that continues to inspire us. And these people are being mentioned today as well. Thank you very much, community of supporters. Thank you to the very influential Flying Binary CEO, cybersecurity expert, and PhD guest, Dr. Jackie Taylor, for introducing me to today's guest, Annabel Kaye. Jackie's mentored the founders of 3 unicorns, 1 billion valuation businesses, and hundreds of entrepreneurs who have built 7, 8, and 9-figure businesses. Moreover, you can meet her every Wednesday at 1:30 CET during her Profit for Purpose audio event on LinkedIn. Engage in conversation here or during our live stream. Don't be shy, say hello, what brings you here, or simply leave us a little like or heart. We're coming together in this virtual space, whether on LinkedIn, Facebook, or YouTube. Our Women on It community is here. Finally, I would like to thank Google Women Tech Makers Mentor Development Program, especially Lucero, Basia, Patricia Patyrok, and my mentor Maya Beham, and mentee Katerina Peskova. Congratulations to all alumni, and it feels great to empower women on it, hack the future. The most important outcome for the cohort was, by choosing progress over perfection, we enhance our lives, improve our learning, and strengthen our relationships. Let's go to today's episode. We are going to learn how to close the freelance compliance gap. Freelancing or running a small business means you have to keep up with legalities, which is particularly tricky given the cost of lawyers. In addition to constantly changing technology, venues, and dates, we are also having to switch between disciplines at speeds we have never done before. Multitasking is a digital dynamic. Regardless of what you do, however you do it, your working contracts need to reflect recent changes in order to accommodate the way you work today. Everything from copyrights, IP, postponements, cancellations due to travel, changing platforms, briefs, and more requires thorough planning. Our guest, Annabel, has spent more than 40 years helping growing businesses sort out the practical and legal side of paying people. In 1980, she founded Irenicon. That must be when you were an embryo, helping organizations in the UK sort out HR and employment law issues. In 2009, fascinated by the growing gig economy, she founded KoffeeKlatch, specifically to support organizations which outsource to freelancers, ensuring a win-win where all parties maximize the value of relationship and seeking to close any compliance gaps to avoid problems for companies and freelancers alike. Annabel, where in the world are you today?
I'm sitting in beautiful Wiltshire and I can see the autumn sunshine and a stiff wind from my window. So I'm in the UK, but in the West.
You're in the UK. It's lovely to hear that it's beautiful weather. We talked about perfectionist and how it is actually stifling the progress. Perfectionists can show up in hundreds of different ways, and each flavor is unique. It's not enough just to know that we have perfectionist patterns. Once we find the patterns, we need to identify why we have them. Most often, perfectionism stops us from progress, and we want to have perfect compliance. We want to have perfect documents. We want to have perfect contracts. How to achieve them? Is there a way, Annabel?
Well, I think it depends on how you define perfection. One of the interesting phenomenons I find with KoffeeKlatch, because we support a lot of startups in the service sector, is people who've been in business maybe a month, downloading our contracts, which are designed to kind of give them what they need, and coming back to me and saying, I want to change it all because I want to make it perfect. And that's because their definition of perfect is understandably based on their business experience today. And our definition of perfect, maybe not perfect, but more than good enough, is based on the collective experience of our clients and our team over an extended period of time. So one of the problems with perfectionism is it can limit you to your own concepts and your own idea of how things should be and give you a very tidy and perfect thing, which actually turns out to be inadequate.
So, rather than worry about the perfect contract, what are the most important things or assets where we could check and see whether we have everything covered?
Well, if you want people can get hold of me afterwards, and those of you in the UK, I can give you a checklist of the things that you are obliged by law to cover. And those things are mostly there to protect your customers, particularly if they're consumers. So they're things like your proper business name. And surprisingly, we did a lot of free reviews in the summer, as we often do for research. And 8 out of 10 of the contracts we reviewed got the name of either the freelancer or their client wrong. So it's quite important to understand the fundamentals. It's really important to set out clearly what you charge, where you can be found, how you can be contacted, and any business registrations that are relevant to you. For example, if you're registered for VAT in the UK, which has different names across the rest of the world, or whether you have a supervisory body, it shouldn't be difficult to work out who you are, and at the very least your contract should contain all of that.
So, Annabel, you started, everybody needs to start somewhere. Can you tell us what would be your advice for any female who wants to start and needs to look at the compliance part of things?
Well, it slightly depends where you are, but obviously speaking from a UK-centric position, which is similar in other parts of the world, but not necessarily identical, you really need to start by understanding that you either are or are not in a regulated business. So if you're in a field where you have to be a member of this or a member of the local chamber of commerce, you need to do that. Because much as we think of ourselves often as digital nomads and under the radar, we are not. We are increasingly being seen and heard and found by both the taxman and other regulators. You also need to realize that you do need to pay tax somewhere. The fantasy that we all sit on a beach with a laptop and make $1 million tax-free is an illusion and a delusion. And even if you think you shouldn't be paying tax, somebody has to build hospitals and make roads, and that comes from the taxes we pay. So don't go under the radar, because later on it causes you massive problems. And we do see tiny businesses start making money and then get killed by a big tax demand because they didn't sort themselves out in that area.
Mm.
When you've sorted out money and regulation, there's obviously data privacy and data handling comes next, but that's a whole other story.
That's a whole other story, and it is very overwhelming. But I have to say, Annabelle, that I sat down and I flicked through what is really required. And once I've written down a kind of set of rules and how I kind of go through data, how I hold the data, and how I am going to process the data. And I also made a contract with everybody in my company to sign it off, because Poland was crazy about the GDPR at that time. They are not so much anymore, but I mean, it wasn't that difficult after all, and it made sense. So, in terms of GDPR, what are the most important things you have to be compliant if your business is based in EU or UK?
Well, I think it's easier to think of data as money because, in a sense, the reason why we have to be very careful with our customers' data, our suppliers' data, and our team data is people are trying to steal it. And they are trying to steal it in order to use it to make money for them. There's a big black market in personal data. And if we stopped thinking about it as just random bureaucracy and information and understood that, in effect, the people who give us information are lending it to us to take care of, we would approach the whole thing with a much more sensible hat on. And you're quite right. So in that context, you need to know, what are you collecting and where are you keeping it? Because if every one of your clients and prospects were to give you £10 on loan, you wouldn't put it on a table and then leave the room with all the windows and doors open and go away for a week. But many of us do the equivalent when it comes to personal data, that we're very happy to collect it, but we don't really know why we're sharing it or how to secure it. And as the big cyber criminals are getting increasingly locked out, the big institutions, Jackie Taylor will tell you, they are coming down the food chain and starting to hack and fish smaller and smaller enterprises because they know that many of us have left our doors open and we are easy pickings. So we do need to look at securing our data. And that means not just sharing all of the information we have with anybody who happens to be on our team. You need to share only the information they need to do their job. And the biggest thing freelancers suffer from on the receiving end and on the giving out end is login sharing. If you are sharing a login with someone else, you can't have multi-factor authentication on. So you've had to drop your level of security anyway. And then if something goes wrong, you can't tell which of the 2 of you or 5 of you or 10 of you made the error that led to the problem. And people are really wicked about login sharing, as far as I'm concerned. We come up against it every single day.
So, two-phase authentication is probably key here, apart from a very sensible approach to cybersecurity, changing your password every so often. But let's go and look at the problems one step at a time. You talked about the taxation and the object of having your business registered wherever in the world you are. Don't start with a gray area, because this is not going to end up well sooner or later if you have a growing business on your mind. The other thing is, you talked about the data protection, and we know that whoever holds the data, and we've had a couple of our guests talking about the importance of having your mailing list, having your customers at your fingertips is very important. So now, what would be the next step for any entrepreneur who wants to be compliant?
Well, I'd like to talk about data at your fingertips in the context of data on your phone, right? I have a smartphone. It's not that smart. Some people have even better phones than me. But on it, theoretically, I can log in and find literally thousands of customer records. I don't tend to do it very much, by the way, because I find the screen's too small if I'm doing something on that sort of scale. But we all do it. Have a look at your own phone and ask yourself the question, is the data encrypted on that phone? Now, by encrypted, I don't mean have you set a password or have you set yourself a PIN number, because those are ways to stop people getting in. But encryption means that if someone gets into your phone, can they read the data or not? Now, if you are using an Apple phone, unless you've mucked about with the settings on a mad night, your data is encrypted. But if, like me, you're an Android user, you need to make sure that you've set up encryption and put your personal data about customers and team members, and probably finance data if you've got any sense, into the encrypted area. Apart from anything else, how many of us have lost a phone? Taken it to a bar, left it in a restaurant, in a taxi? Have you?
Oh, totally.
Now, if that phone has access to, say, 10,000 customer records, that is potentially and actually a massive data breach. If it is encrypted, it means that if someone finds the phone and manages to hack the password, and we've got live demos on our GDPR site of one of our IT support people hacking people's phone passwords with little bits of software, and most of them take less than 4 minutes. So if you think my data's safe because I've got a password, think again, right? But if you've got it encrypted, which means only the person with the encryption key can read it, they are much less likely to get into your data. They'd have to be like MI5 or James Bond level people. And most of us don't lose our phones to people with that level of skill. So I really urge you, if you do nothing else, take nothing else on board, make sure that your portable devices, particularly your phone, but also your laptop, are encrypted. So if they're stolen or lost, you haven't lost the data that goes with it. Obviously, you won't have access unless you have it backed up somewhere else. But I'm talking about you haven't lost it to someone else to use it if you've encrypted it. And that would make such a difference to freelance security.
How do you encrypt it?
Well, sadly, that depends on the exact model of the exact Android phone you're using. Even on Samsung phones, and which is a very big brand, there are at least 3 different ways to do it. So my advice to you is to Google your device name, and YouTube is great for this. How do I encrypt my fill in the blanks name of phone with the model number? And you will either get YouTube's videos saying you can do it, or if you've got a very old phone, because some of us don't like to update all the time, you may find that you can't. In which case, I suggest you, if you're using your phone for business, that you at least get onto a version where you can. Because when we started this process in 2016, about 40% of Androids could not be encrypted. It's gone down, but if you've got an old phone, a really old phone, or a knockoff copy you bought from China or whatever, a clone, you may not be able to.
Thank you so much. That's the first thing I'm gonna do tomorrow. And definitely, I have lost my phone, and it was quite recently. And I have swiped all my data. I'm still trying to see whether it resurfaces sometime, but it's nowhere to be seen. Probably it's somebody with much better hacking skills than me. I did not encrypt it, and although I have changed my passwords on various emails, right. We need to make sure it's password protected. We need to make sure our data is also, we have backlog of our data somewhere else. What else is there to protect your business from being hacked?
Well, I don't want to turn this into cybersecurity, but obviously you need everybody who accesses that data to do it securely, not just you. So if you've got, for example, 3 or 4 freelancers, it's no good you encrypting your phone and having double two-factor authentication if your freelancers have got single passwords and access to all data. And one of the problems I'm coming across at the moment is it's quite popular in Europe to outsource to either the Philippines or India or other countries because the VAs and the web designers there are cheaper. But you need to be aware of the fact that a lot of people in those countries, very understandably, haven't got multiple devices. They're not sitting in an office with an iPad, a laptop, a phone, and a desktop. And they tend to share devices. And that means, and we get this in the UK too, that when they're not working on that device, someone else has got it. Now, if they log on to either a gaming site or a porn site, depending on who's using it, or even some other dodgy commercial sites, and pick up a virus or malware, that will come through to the device that you're using, so that when you log on perfectly securely, you think to the data, you are transmitting that malware, that hacking, that phishing code with you. So you need to make sure that wherever possible, your people do not share devices. And if they are in a country where that's simply not possible, you really need to get your own IT people to pay the money. You're saving money on outsourcing outside of Europe and North America to help set up that phone, that laptop, so that there's only one user at admin level and everyone else is below that level, so that no system changes can be made from little Johnny playing Dungeons and Dragons or big Johnny on a porn site or someone clicking on a phishing mail. Set up the barriers and make these requirements of the people you pay, not just things you might think about one night in the pub.
So we are back, thanks to your brilliant explanation to compliance and how to set up documents and how to make sure everybody is on the same level of understanding security and how to protect your business. Now, you talked about outsourcing and how it is a great way of managing your business. What do you think, what is the way for somebody who's a solopreneur or freelancer and wants to start to grow their business and make use of these outsourcing opportunities, whether it's a VA somewhere in the Philippines or somebody doing a video or live stream in India for you?
I think it depends on the background before you started your business. Some people have set up a business having got great experience of managing teams, and they know all about how to delegate and other people to do things. And all they need to know is how to contract properly with their people to make sure they own the things they think they do. And by that, I mean, in most countries in the world, and certainly in the common law jurisdictions of America, the UK, and I think Australia, if you have an employee and you pay them as an employee and they create something for you, if it's something done in the course of work, you own the rights in that work. But if you pay a freelancer who is self-employed to do that work, by default, they own the rights in that work unless and until those rights are transferred to you. So you need to be very careful when you're outsourcing to contract that your IP comes back to you if that's your strategy. So if you're a consultant or a coach and you're doing an online course, but all the videos have been created and edited by someone else, make sure you own the rights. Don't imagine that simply because you paid them, you do, because it's not necessarily so. And in some countries, it's sufficient to just have a contract that says that. And in other countries, specific documents have to be signed. So it depends a lot on where you are, but don't think because you paid for it, you own the full copyright to do what you want with that.
Don't presume something that you understand, have it written. We have lovely comments from our community. Lian Georgades said, thank you, Beata. This is relevant. It speaks to my data protection consultancy. And she's asking whether this is live. I hope you're watching us, Lian. Come with your questions, whatever it might be. Let's challenge Annabel and me. Marianne Madera says, hello, Annabel. Thank you so much. I will now check my devices. Yes, please check your devices. Make sure it's secure. And also watch a couple of videos on YouTube how to secure your device, or whether it's a phone, whether it's laptop, whatever digital equipment you're using. Annabel, you have quite a long experience. Over the time, it has changed quite a lot, because I believe in the 1980s, you did not have that many digital devices, did you?
I had a typewriter with what used to be called a golf ball in it that went round and round. And then I think I went over to something called a Wang word processing machine, which was most unfortunately named, in my opinion. And it would allow you to kind of edit copy that you'd already typed in, and it would sort of reprint it. So it was, we had phones. I don't remember if we had digital phones. I did in about 84 get a mobile phone, but not really mobile as we know it. It took up the whole of the boot of my car, and even the handset, you had to be a bodybuilder to lift. So we've come a long way in tech. The new technology when I founded Irenicon was fax, and we had clients that we used to have to say, we need to fax you something confidential. Can you find your nearest copy shop or print shop that has the fax, and can you stand by the fax and get them to ring us and tell us the number? It's hard to imagine now, isn't it?
It is very hard to imagine. I remember my first phone and the joy, one of the first phones, and the joy of creating my own music on my Nokia 3310. Now, we talked about how to protect your business, how to protect from outsourcing your business to others, and make sure that your IP, your creative power, is not being stolen from you. Now I want to go back to where you were. How did you start, as a freelancer, or did you start working in a corporation and to set up your business? Tell us a little bit of your experience.
I think I've been in business one way and another since I was about 14. But I did have a period of having jobs, which immediately preceded founding Irenicon. And this was back end of the 70s, so it was a long time ago. And I very quickly realized at that time that the corporations I worked with were very happy for me to do the work. But they were terribly worried that as a woman, I couldn't cope with the senior titles or the pay. And increasingly, I found myself going, but I'm doing the work. And they would then put a man in on over to sort of manage me, who knew absolutely nothing about what the work was. And so ultimately, I decided that I wanted to be the boss and got out of that environment so that I could name my own salary, or at least pay myself what the marketplace thought I was worth.
And you definitely grew your company. How many people are you employing, or you're outsourcing to?
We don't tend to employ many people. We currently have 2 directors and 1 former director who's now a consultant, who is in a long, slow retirement mode, really. We have across the world a regular team of about 9 VAs, tech specialists, who support us in the mechanical side of delivering our contracts, the marketing, making the website work sometimes better than others. We also have an editorial board of 4 people who work with us to make sure that our contracts make sense, that they cover what they should, and to help us as far as possible to simplify them and put them into plain English. Because one of the biggest problems we come across is freelancers in particular sign contracts they don't understand. And I don't blame them. I don't understand half of them either. No one can understand them. They've not been written to be understood. And I think that's a mistake.
Mm. Putting it in plain English is definitely something we need to consider when we are copying contracts from all over the website. We have Leanne saying hello, virtually nodding my head in agreement to many valid points being made around business compliance. Thank you, Leanne. Maybe you could share some of your experience with us today in the chat. Tell us what you believe we should pay most attention to when setting up our business or running our business, and how to protect it. Now, you mentioned the fact that many people are not putting it in plain English. Why is that? Is it not understanding the legal side of things, or is it because we are just puzzled and we don't understand what we really need to pay attention? What do you think is the biggest mistake we make when drafting a contract?
Well, firstly, I don't think most of us are writing contracts. I think lawyers are writing contracts, and they tend to prefer a mixture of Latin and late Victorian English, and to use words that no one today would use. For example, I saw a contract this morning that was full of what would happen if there was malfeasance. Now, I'm not sure if this is a phrase you use every day, but it certainly would have defeated the majority of my clients. They would not have known whether malfeasance was or was not an issue. The problem with this approach is that if neither party knows what the contract provides for, you're going to be in breach of the contract. Now, in breach means not following it, because if you can't understand it, you can't follow it. And certainly in the common law jurisdictions, the party that's in breach of the contract can't rely on the contract for the benefits of the contract. So if you sign a contract you don't understand and accidentally don't follow it, you might as well have not signed anything.
Mm. Now, we have a question from Olga. Olga, hold on a second. We still have to go through. I have to share one experience with you. I had a contract written in Polish, and the person that signed it did not speak Polish, although I kind of translated and on the spot, and he was agreeing to sign the contract on the understanding of the rules, and then he was in breach. I mean, in terms of he didn't want to continue, he just canceled the contract and claimed that he did not understand it fully because he doesn't speak Polish. How to protect? Is there a way to protect um, other than just going to interpreter or sworn interpreter?
If your contract is written simply in your mother tongue, it's not a big deal to get the contract interpreted. Even Google Translate can manage simple, short sentences. But if obviously you allow a lot of legal gobbledygook to come into it, you will have to pay for very expensive translations. Our Google Translate and its equivalent will simply fail. So if you can get your contract down to simple propositions in direct language, I will do this, you will do that. I need this from you, you need that from me. This is what is being paid for this. This is when. This is what is extra. This is what happens if you provide stuff late. This is what happens if I have to do this urgently or in the middle of the night. This is what happens if I screw up and it doesn't go properly. It's quite possible to write a contract in plain Polish and have it translated to plain English. It's when you go gobbledygook on it that it all goes wrong. But I do think if you don't share a mother tongue and it's an important contract, you should invest in getting it translated, assuming that the person whose language it is in can understand it in the first place. If not, you should fix that first, because
Or
otherwise you're
resign
not
from
in
the contract.
agreement. Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. Now, Olga Vasina is asking, so do you find it best to stick with English common law for all agreements, Annabel? That's in relation to UK law versus other laws.
Well, I think it depends where you are and what rights you want. If, like me, you tend to trade globally and you're based in the UK, I tend to put in my contracts that English and Welsh law governs the contracts because it's my local law and I understand it. I would certainly avoid contracting into any American state's law unless I really knew what I was doing and my professional indemnity insurance covered me for America. Because the minute you go and tell your professional indemnity insurers, I'm contracting in this state and I can be sued in Texas and Kansas, you'll find your professional indemnity insurance goes up. And I think, particularly as online entrepreneurs, you need to understand that unless you sort out which legal system you want to litigate in exclusively, and that's a very important part of it, anyone anywhere in the world who does business with you can sue in their local system, which obviously you're not expecting to be sued by your customers. You're not setting up to be sued, but then who is? And, somebody gets sued every day. Make sure you've sorted this out. Whether English common law jurisdiction is best for you depends on what you're doing, where you are, and with whom.
Absolutely. Well, if things go wrong, then how do you mitigate the problem? Do you go to legal representative, or you try to negotiate with client and try to see what can be done?
I think it's always best to have the conversation, though it doesn't always work. And I think one of the problems as freelancers is that we don't like to have the conversation. So we let things slide far too long. And by the time we are ready to have that conversation, whether we're either owed too much money, we've gone on working too long without being paid, or we know the client is really, really frustrated because we haven't had the courage to say, this isn't working, let's have a conversation about it. So I think you always start with that, because if your contract is well written, both of you knew your obligations, so you can actually work out for yourself, where did it go wrong? Did I not do a bit? Did they not do a bit? Did we all do it but at the wrong time? Was it done late? Where was the problem? And if the problem can still be fixed, fix it. Because if you've got a client who normally pays you and it's just costed you one time, it's better to try and secure that client than get rid of them and find another one who might be even more trouble. If you've got a good one, hold on to them.
Absolutely. So now a quite interesting question, because, for example, in Poland till the beginning of 2000, we did not have mediation. Mediation now is a big thing. Do we put option of mediation on the contract? Is it worth it for small contracts?
Interesting enough, I mean, I do have a sort of a friend and person I'll send mediations to occasionally who's a mediator based in, I'm going to get this country wrong in a minute. Anyway, I actually went to see her. Begins with that, and I can't think what it is. Not Latvia, not Lithuania. Anyway, and she's very powerfully for it, and it is definitely a common movement. And certainly in the UK, if you seek to sue in the courts, they will send you off to try to mitigate, whether or not you've got a mitigation clause in your contract anyway. It's moot whether small businesses should automatically have litigation clauses in it mitigate, because first of all, it would, if it's not enforceable, if you don't arrive at a judgment that the other side can be made to follow, then you're going to be asked to pay your share for some kind of arbitration or mediation that the other side won't comply with. And if you're going for binding mediation, it's not that different to going through the courts. But the difference being, unless your contract gives you a right of appeal, it's a one-shot mediation. When it comes to the end, that's it. A lot depends, I think, on the type of things you're doing in your business, the costs are missed to you, and how you want to proceed. Some people by nature are compromisers. They want to build a relationship. They want to keep it all going. And mediation is very good for you if you're one of those people. I'm terrible. I never wanted half of anything in the whole of my life. I'm a fighter. I'm truculent. I want it all. If you don't give me what I'm entitled to, I don't want some of it. I want all of it. So I think it depends both on your business strategy, on the jurisdiction you're in, and on your temperament. I would find getting half of what I was entitled to very grieving. And mediation can often mean that. It's rare for both parties to get everything they want, because that's what mediation means, isn't it?
Absolutely. I've gone through the process some time ago. We've got Leanne. Hello, Leanne. Lovely to hear from you. Advice from Leanne. Clear strategic business direction matched with clear legal terms and proprietary controls. My goodness, Leanne, that's a very sound advice. Now, coming back to the fighter mode versus giving up mode, I have to tell you that I had one customer, and the sad thing was, it was another female who was working for the government entity, and she basically screwed me over half the price because she wasn't happy with the service I provided. And actually, I was surrounded by a very good people. I mean, a friend of mine, her husband was a lawyer, and he said, it doesn't matter. It's a small amount. It's a question of really doing things right. And she's done you wrong. So we need to go there, and we need to uh, challenge her behavior. And I have to say, I won, even though it was a very, very difficult time for me, because I could not believe that somebody would screw me over such a small amount. And also because I didn't believe it's nice to just pay half of the price for the service without even talking about the fact that she wasn't happy with the service. Now, how do you go back to living your emotions and still talking to the same client, months back? And do you see a way of managing that contract, or you just give up on doing anything in the future? What would be Annabelle's advice?
I think, again, it depends on your temperament, but it also depends on the contract and its worth and how much hassle it is to you to replace it versus, in a way, zip it up. Now, I believe profoundly in something someone taught me in the 80s when I was first getting going, and it was this: be a trader, not a beggar. And one of the things we do wrong, particularly as business owners, is people go, I want to pay less. You go, fine. I want this as well. Okay, fine. So then we end up begging them to pay us. You need to put yourself in a position where if a client pays you slowly, they pay you a great deal more. And you can do that through interest payments clauses in your contracts in countries where that's permissible. I appreciate if you're in an Islamic country, you can't do that, but you can make separate charges for every time you have to chase them for payment. There are ways around that. You can also have a business model, which is very much, if you pay me in advance, you pay this. If you pay me in stage payments, you pay that. But if you pay me in arrears, you pay that, with the prices going up. So what I do with clients who have irritated me about payment is I put them on prepayment only, and I make sure that I am adequately rewarded for dealing with them. Quite often, by the way, they are oblivious to the fact that I nearly couldn't pay my mortgage because they fannied about and went on holiday and forgot to pay me. They're quite nice people, but they do not understand how the freelance world works. They wouldn't expect not to be paid by their boss because their boss forgot, but somehow it's okay to not pay freelancers because we forgot or we missed the accounts cut off page or whatever. There's a lot of not understanding. So my motto is always to make it slightly more painful for people to muck me around for them than it is for me.
Excellent advice. Thank you, Annabelle. Incentivizing your clients for paying early is definitely key. Now you talk, and I've seen it on your Facebook page, don't rely on a handful of clients to pay your mortgage. What do you mean by that?
Well, When we get going, we often are so excited we've got 1 or 2 or 3 good clients. We kind of start building our sales pipeline, we start building our funnel. And then if we lose one of those key clients, it can take us, depending what we do, 6 months, 9 months to replace them. And that can mean we can't pay our mortgage or our rent, depending where you are these days. And that very nearly happened to me. In the mid-'80s, I had a very big corporate client, one of those brand names everyone boasts about having worked for. And we worked for them for about 8 years. And then one day they came in at no notice and said, another law firm is, I think it was £5 an hour cheaper than you. And we've gone to a corporate collective bargaining and you're out. And I had to go back to the office and lay off 12 people because there was no way we could maintain what we were doing now that that client had gone. And it very nearly finished us. And it wasn't that we'd done anything wrong or whatever. We'd just been undercut by someone who, by the way, 6 months later put their fees up to way higher than ours had ever been and kept them there. So from that, I learned that losing a big client hurts. Weirdly enough, losing a little client doesn't hurt so much. So one of the things I love about KoffeeKlatch is we have hundreds, if not thousands, of clients paying us £50, £100, £250. And in the nicest possible way, and I don't mean this in any disrespectful way, if one of those customers decides not to spend another £100 with us ever again, I'm not struggling to pay the rent.
Absolutely. Be a trader, not a beggar. We are coming to the great question of how to identify what is the right price and add tax on top of it.
That's a very big question. Pricing, I think, is the devil's work. Most of us as freelancers tend to start with how much do other people charge and should I charge a little bit less than them, which in effect is a race to the bottom, particularly now that we live in a global economy when I guarantee you that there is someone in another country who is charging less than you. So I think we've got to get away from the idea of what's my target hourly rate being at market rate and a bit under as a kind of competitive stance and start looking at the value we provide. And almost all small business coaches now will say at some point or another, you need to move on to packages. You get this thing for X amount of money, not me for so much an hour or whatever. Now, it can be very difficult when you're a startup because you don't know how long you take to do things. But as soon as you can move away from time-based pricing, you stand some chance of making reasonable money for what you do if you are effective and efficient in the way that you do it.
So, KoffeeKlatch, you mentioned the fact that there is some content on your website. Which content do people click most on? Do you know?
Two things. They click a lot on one which is really aimed at individuals about, what if someone insists on seeing my ID and my passport, which is necessary to rent accommodation in the UK these days and various other things, even though it was a bit of a, in the nice possible way, throwaway blog because our market is the freelancers who are in business, not the end customer. It's always been a very, very popular blog and it generates a lot of traffic for us. Anything at all about freelancers' rights and tax is very popular. And at the moment, our government keeps changing the law on IR35. So that's always a high traffic item. But beyond that, I don't know. I'm rubbish at these sorts of things. I've got a whole panel of analytics and I look at it and think, there's a lot of numbers. And then I go off and do something else.
Absolutely. It's very difficult to keep track of your data. We have some ways of how to enhance your website. We talked with Carrie de Phillips some time ago. She is the founder of Sisters in SEO. I advise you to check that podcast and that live stream. And also going back to our lovely guest's website, KoffeeKlatch is there with lots of advice on contracts, on how to sign a contract with freelancer or how to start as a freelancer. Not all success is about sitting on desert island with famous people. What does it mean, Annabel?
Well, I think there's a tendency, particularly in the online world, for people to go, I was on an island with Tony Robbins, or I was on an island with Richard Branson, and da da da. And it can make people who are not there or not even heading there feel a bit inadequate, if the truth be known. Whereas I always think success is about living the life you want. And much as desert islands are kind of sweet, it's not a place I want to spend a great deal of time. Anyway, I couldn't take my dogs because flying them around the world would be too much for all of us. So success for me is very much about getting to spend time with the people I love and being able to afford to do the things I like. And that doesn't mean for me owning a Maserati or um, living a look at me lifestyle, really. I mean, good luck to you if you want to, and good luck to you if you do. I'm not against it. It's just not what success means to me.
And we can see that building a business, just providing contract advice, how to draft things, GDPR advice, is definitely a very profitable business. Annabel, since you're talking about Ireland, let's go to our favorite question. Imagine the pandemic is over. You could travel with your dogs in a private jet to any country in the world to meet anybody you wish to meet in the world. Who would you choose to talk to, and where would you go to?
Well, I think if the jet's arriving soon, I'd love to go to South Africa to see my South African friends who I haven't seen for years due to the fact they have had visa problems coming here. And the last time I was there was on my honeymoon. So I know that's not like there's a really famous person I'd like to go and see, but I would love to be able to pick up the ties of dearly loved friends there, and probably in other countries too, that it's really quite hard to get to the last few years. Um,
Mm.
in terms of
You
famous
mentioned,
people, though, that would be
yeah.
a different question.
Mm. You mentioned Brain Brown, TEDx speaker, author, and professor.
Well, yes, I was going to say, for someone that is known in the world as opposed to personal friends, I would love to jet off and have breakfast or time on an island with Brené Brown. I love her thinking. I don't know if you've caught any of her TEDx talks, but it's very much about how we function, how we think, what shapes us and makes us. And I'm fascinated by that. I'm fascinated by where psychology meets emotion and where both of them meet neuroscience. I guess I'm a bit
Mm.
of a nerd in my spare time, but I think it's amazing. And her insights and her books and the things she says are just unwinding things that other people make a big complication of. And I would love to have breakfast with her or fly over and see her and go, right, what are you studying at the moment? What's your current workload? Because I think she delivers outstanding work and outstanding content, and ought to be, famous in every household, as far as I'm concerned.
Well, I definitely need to check her TEDx speech. I did not know about her. Thank you very much for sharing. Amazing role model for women on it. What is the number one book you can sit and think, oh, I wish I read it before I started my career?
Um, yeah, I was about 5 years in before I read it. It was a book, I don't even know if it's in print that much these days, called Grow Rich While You Sleep. And the author, I think, is Ben Sweetland. And
Mm.
it's very contracyclical to what's happened for most of my life. The idea has been you got up at 4 a.m. and you ran 20 miles and you cleared your wind train before breakfast and you only needed 5 hours sleep a night. And, terribly, to me, weird and unhealthy patterns of behavior. If it works for you, good luck. But I'm a sleeper. I really, really, really like to sleep. And I have noticed that when I relax and set my goals and intentions and I have a really long sleep, as often as not, I wake up with the ideas I need to get going in the direction I want to. And all of that came from reading that book. And I wish I'd read it not only before I started my business, but when I was about 14. Could have saved a lot of much misplaced effort and focused much more on rest and achievement.
Well, lots of patterns and behaviors in your motivation and inspiration. Are you working on any exciting new projects, Annabel?
Well, I don't know that anyone else would find them exciting. We've just finished updating the the contracts for the global contracts for the new UK cross-border data provisions. We're just getting ready to update the UK ones for the new UK provisions. It's not what most people would call exciting, but I love the challenge of taking 40 or 400 pages of utter gobbledygook that no one can understand and turning it into a form or a couple of pages and a few videos and go, look, don't panic. It's not complicated. All you need to do is this. And for me, and I realize this is unique in all the world, it's exciting, even though sometimes it nearly kills me, to take that stuff, that pudding, that bureaucratic stuff, and then take it to a solopreneur or a very small business and go, look, get rid of all that. This is the bit you need to focus on. So yeah, my
Mm,
excitement's not everyone's.
mm. Well, it goes to that another book I would like to mention, In Bird by Bird, Instructions on Writing and Life by Anne Lamott. She talks about the importance of moving one step at a time. Her example and the book's title came from her young brother, who in grade school had to do a research report on dozens of different birds. It was the light night before, and he hadn't started. Their father sat him down and gently told him that it was going to be fine. All he had to do was take it one at a time, bird by bird. Lamott uses this example as a way to coach us to go through the daunting task of writing or uh, going through very mundane tasks or going through contracts, whatever it might be. It's really taking small, actionable points and moving towards that. Now, we talked about who motivates you, who inspires you. What is your life lesson quote and how did it change you?
Well, I think the person that inspires me, and again, it's difficult because a lot of my inspiration is kind of domestic, if you see what I mean, has got to be Pema Chodron, the possibly Buddhist monk. I'm not quite sure if she's actually a Buddhist monk, but and she actually teaches us and asks us to accept non-permanence and change. And I find that very inspiring because I spent about half my life fighting change. And then I suddenly realized change kept happening and I might as well get with the program and stop exhausting myself. And I find almost all of her work quite inspiring, possibly because she's so peaceful and I'm so not. You know, it's a real contrast to my nature. But I find her idea of accepting what is, even if it might not be as you want it to be, a great place to start my work from, as well as my day-to-day living.
Mm. There is only one thing that makes a dream impossible to achieve: the fear of failure by Paulo Coelho. Quotation. And this is it. I mean, this is the end of our lovely show. And we talked about compliance. We talked about the fact that you have to be a trader, not a beggar. And Annabel taught us all about how to make your business compliant. Next week, we will be joining and talking about how to plan the perfect success formulas to achieve high performance with Vamsi. And in the meantime, I would like to thank our lovely audience: Lian Georgiades, Marian Madera, Olga Vesina, and Kim Vermak. Thank you very much, everyone, for joining us today. Annabel, it's been a pleasure. I hope Jackie Taylor ears are burning today. And I would like to wish you every success with your exciting project, whatever it might take you. And as always, our positivity quote comes from Positive Thinking Only and goes: look for something positive in each day, even if some days you have to look a little harder. If you don't like something, change it. If you can't change it, whether it's your contract, whether it is a freelance work, change your attitude, as Maya Angelou says. Today is your day to hack the future you want. Woman on it, hack it today. Thank you.